The sun was setting, casting a warm golden glow over the small town of Cedar Ridge. The streets were quiet, except for the occasional hum of a passing car. At the edge of town stood a modest motel, the Cedar Ridge Inn. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean and welcoming, with a sign that flickered slightly in the evening light. Inside, the reception area was cozy, with a small desk, a pot of coffee brewing, and a young woman named Clara sitting behind the counter. Clara was in her mid-20s, with kind eyes and a warm smile. She had been working at the Cedar Ridge Inn for about a year, and she took pride in her job. But tonight, something was different. Her usual cheerful demeanor was replaced by a heavy sadness. She tried to focus on her work, but her mind kept drifting to the troubles she was facing at home. Her mother was sick, and the medical bills were piling up. Clara had been working extra shifts, but it still wasn't enough. She felt like she was drowning, and there was no one to turn to. As she sat there, lost in her thoughts, the door to the motel opened, and a man walked in. He was tall, with graying hair and a kind face. He wore a simple jacket and jeans, and he carried a small suitcase. Clara quickly wiped her eyes and put on a smile, determined to do her job well, no matter how she was feeling. "Good evening," she said, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. "Welcome to the Cedar Ridge Inn. How can I help you?" The man smiled back at her. "Good evening. I'd like to book a room for the night, please." Clara nodded and began typing on the computer. "Of course. Let me get that set up for you." She handed him a form to fill out and watched as he wrote down his name, Daniel Carter. As Daniel filled out the form, he couldn't help but notice the sadness in Clara's eyes. He had always been good at reading people, and he could tell that something was weighing heavily on her. He wanted to ask if she was okay, but he didn't want to intrude. Instead, he decided to keep the conversation light. "It's a nice little town you have here," he said, looking around the reception area. "Quiet, peaceful. Just what I needed after a long day of travel." Clara forced a smile. "Yes, Cedar Ridge is a lovely place. I hope you enjoy your stay." Daniel nodded and handed her the completed form. Clara processed his payment and handed him a key. "Your room is just down the hall, number 12. If you need anything, please don't hesitate to let me know." "Thank you," Daniel said, picking up his suitcase. He hesitated for a moment, then added, "Are you okay? You seem a little down." Clara's eyes widened in surprise. She hadn't expected anyone to notice her sadness, let alone a stranger. She quickly shook her head. "Oh, I'm fine. Just a long day, that's all." Daniel studied her for a moment, then nodded. "All right. Well, if you need to talk, I'm a good listener." Clara gave him a small, grateful smile. "Thank you. I appreciate that." Daniel headed down the hall to his room, leaving Clara alone at the reception desk. She let out a deep breath and leaned back in her chair, feeling the weight of her worries pressing down on her. She wished she could just break down and cry, but she knew she had to stay strong. She had a job to do, and she couldn't let her personal problems get in the way. As the night went on, Clara tried to focus on her work, but her mind kept drifting back to her mother. She thought about the hospital bills, the mounting debt, and the feeling of helplessness that seemed to grow with each passing day. She felt like she was trapped in a never-ending cycle of stress and worry, and she didn't know how to break free. Meanwhile, Daniel settled into his room. He had traveled to Cedar Ridge for a specific reason, though he hadn't mentioned it to Clara. He was the owner of the Cedar Ridge Inn, though he rarely visited. He preferred to stay behind the scenes, letting his managers handle the day-to-day operations. But lately, he had been hearing rumors about the motel's declining performance, and he wanted to see for himself what was going on. Daniel had always believed in leading by example, and he thought the best way to understand the problems at the motel was to experience it as a guest. He had booked a room under a fake name, hoping to get an honest look at how things were being run. But he hadn't expected to encounter someone like Clara. As he sat on the edge of the bed, Daniel couldn't stop thinking about the sadness in Clara's eyes. He had seen that look before, in the eyes of people who were struggling with more than they could handle. He wanted to help her, but he didn't know how. He decided to keep an eye on her throughout his stay, hoping to find a way to make a difference. The next morning, Daniel woke up early and headed to the motel's small dining area for breakfast. Clara was there, serving coffee and pastries to the guests. She looked tired, but she still managed to smile and greet everyone warmly. Daniel watched her from a distance, impressed by her dedication despite the obvious weight on her shoulders. After breakfast, Daniel decided to explore the town. He walked through the quiet streets, taking the charm of Cedar Ridge. He stopped by a small park, where children were playing and laughing, and he felt a sense of peace wash over him, but his thoughts kept returning to Clara. He couldn't shake the feeling that she needed help, and he was determined to find a way to provide it. That evening, Daniel returned to Motel and found Clara at the reception desk once again. She looked even more tired than before, and her smile seemed forced. Daniel approached her, his heart heavy with concern. "Clara," he said gently, "I can see that something's bothering you. I know we don't know each other well, but if you need someone to talk to, I'm here." Clara looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of surprise and gratitude. She hesitated for a moment, then sighed deeply. "It's just, everything feels so overwhelming right now. My mom is sick, and the bills are piling up. I've been working as much as I can, but it's not enough. I don't know what to do." Daniel listened carefully, his heart breaking for her. He knew what it was like to feel helpless, to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. He reached out and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Clara, you're not alone. There are people who care about you and want to help. Sometimes all you need to do is ask." Clara looked at him, tears welling up in her eyes. "But I don't want to be a burden to anyone. I feel like I should be able to handle this on my own." Daniel shook his head. "You're not a burden. It's okay to ask for help. In fact, it's one of the bravest things you can do." Clara wiped her tears and took a deep breath. "Thank you for listening. It means a lot." Daniel smiled. "Anytime. And if there's anything I can do to help, please let me know." As the days went by, Daniel continued to stay at the motel, getting to know Clara and the other staff members. He saw firsthand the challenges they faced and the dedication they brought to their work. He also learned more about Clara's situation and realized that she wasn't the only one struggling. Many of the employees were dealing with their own personal challenges, and Motel's declining performance was only adding to their stress. Daniel knew he had to do something. He couldn't stand by and watch his employees suffer. He decided to reveal his true identity and take action to improve the motel's operations. He called a meeting with the staff and shared his vision for the future, promising to support them in any way he could. Clara was shocked when she found out that Daniel was the owner of the motel. She felt a mix of emotions, relief, gratitude, and a renewed sense of hope. She realized that she wasn't alone and that there were people who cared about her and wanted to help. With Daniel's support, the Cedar Ridge began to thrive once again. The staff felt valued and motivated, and the motel became a welcoming place for guests from near and far. Clara's mother received the medical care she needed, and Clara was able to focus on her work without the constant weight of worry. In the end, Daniel's decision to go undercover had not only helped him understand the challenges his employees were facing, but it had also given him the opportunity to make a real difference in their lives. He learned that true leadership wasn't about giving orders from a distance. It was about being present, listening, and offering support when it was needed most. As for Clara, she learned that it was okay to ask for help and that she didn't have to face her struggles alone. She found strength in the kindness of others, and she carried that lesson with her as she continued to grow and thrive. The Cedar Ridge became more than just a motel. It became a place of hope where people came together to support one another and create a brighter future. And in the quiet town of Cedar Ridge, the flickering sign of the motel shone brightly, a beacon of resilience and compassion. Moral of the story: sometimes the greatest strength lies in vulnerability. Asking for help is not a sign of weakness, but a step toward healing and growth. True leadership is about empathy, understanding, and being there for others when they need it most. In the end, it's the connections we build and the kindness we show that make the biggest difference in the world. Before we wrap up, I want to take a moment to thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. Stories like these remind us of the power of kindness, courage, and standing up for what's right. If this story touched your heart, made you think, or inspired you in any way, let us know in the comments below. Tell us where you're watching from, And don't forget to share this story with others. Sometimes, a simple act of sharing can make a huge impact. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and join our community. We've got more heartfelt stories coming your way. Until next time, remember, kindness changes lives. See you soon